world hope to have during their lifetime some kind of a discovery of texts. They hope that there might be some new collection of materials that they might be able to look at.
Does ancient wisdom still lie hidden in the sands of the Middle East, waiting to be discovered?
In 1945, the story goes, an Arab peasant was traveling through the desert of Egypt, and he tripped over these large jugs in which were codices, books, these 13 codices that tell these stories of Jesus, these stories of the early Christians that are very different from most of what's preserved in our Bibles. And this story is actually quite engaging because the peasant was apparently involved in a blood feud. His father had been murdered, and he was chasing his father's murderer during the time in which he came across the codices. He then subsequently brought the codices home. He gave them to his mother. She threw them in the straw pile. Some of them were burned for heating, because what is more important when you're living at the edge of subsistence like that? Heat, or what may be absolutely priceless treasures from antiquity? Probably heat. And then the books get into the hands first of a priest and then of a scholar, because he realizes that as he's being chased for having now murdered his father's murderer, that people might very well be coming around to his house, and the books might be seen as contraband. And so they come into the hands of a priest, and then into the hands of a scholar, and then ultimately into the hands of American and European scholars who begin to translate them and publish them.
So the discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library is a dream that has come true for people. And as the early scholars glanced at the contents of these books, they were taken in particular by some titles like the Gospel according to Thomas, the Gospel according to Philip, the Gospel of the Egyptians, the Gospel of Truth. These were new Gospels, besides the New Testament Gospels, new Christian interpretations of Jesus that they could look at, and so they gravitated quickly toward these texts.
These were texts that not only were forbidden by leaders of the early church, they were never even considered for inclusion in the sacred canon. They were books written by a little-known, 2,000-year-old Christian sect who thrived for a time throughout the Roman Empire. They were called Gnostics. The church fathers said they were heretics.
The majority decides what is orthodox and what is heretical. The majority is orthodox, the minority is heretical. The majority goes to heaven, the minority goes to hell for their heresy.
The name Gnostic comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge.
Gnostics believed in the basic structure of the Christian faith in terms of Jesus Christ, but had a very different interpretation than what we would call the Orthodox view of Christianity.
The creation stories of Genesis, embraced by church leaders, were rejected by the Gnostics. For them, the physical world was a cosmic mistake, created by an evil, lesser God.
The Gnostics viewed this world as evil, and even the creator of this world as evil. So ultimately, Christian Gnostics identified the God of what we call the Old Testament as an evil God.
The Gnostics also held that salvation would come by means of an inner knowledge, not of the evil creator God, but of the transcendent God, the realm of light and truth.
Interestingly, we have some materials from Gnostics indicating that they could be just as evangelical as the next person. We have some sermons where Gnostics would go around and say, "Wake up, brother and sister. Wake up that God within. Wake up that light that is within. You're sleeping, you are ignorant, and it's time to wake up."
Perhaps it was their revolutionary ideas. Perhaps it was the growing strength of their movement. Whatever the reason, the writings of the Gnostics were among the books that were forbidden by the early church. One of the most intriguing is a text called the Gospel of Mary. It presents an entirely different Mary Magdalene, not the woman commonly thought of as a prostitute.
In the Gospel of Luke, when Luke introduces Mary Magdalene as a disciple of Jesus, in the preceding paragraph, he had told the story of the unnamed sinful woman who anointed the feet of Jesus. So later in the church tradition, these two women were coalesced, and that's how Mary Magdalene became known in the history of the church as a prostitute, although the texts don't say she was a prostitute.
It was the Gospel of Mary, a book not included in the New Testament, that revealed a fiercely independent Mary Magdalene, a woman who was an apostle and a visionary.
There's a scene in the Gospel of Mary following the ascension of Jesus, in which we see the disciples, Peter, Andrew, Levi, and Mary, sitting around chatting. And at one point, Peter probes Mary as to what she has learned from Jesus. He thinks that she and Jesus have had a particularly close relationship, and that Jesus may have communicated to Mary some special information that they would like to know.
And Peter is quite ready to say that Mary is the most important of the women around Jesus. So he's quite all right with that. But Mary goes on to divulge special teaching that she got from Jesus, and claims to be not first among the women, but specially beloved by Jesus.
The words she speaks to the apostles reflect the unusual mystical teachings of the early Christian Gnostics.
I said to him, Lord, I saw you today in a vision. He answered and said to me, Blessed are you that you did not waver at the sight of me, for where the mind is, there is the treasure. I said to him, Lord, now does he who sees the vision see it through the soul or through the spirit? The Savior answered and said, He does not see through the soul nor through the spirit, but the mind which is between the two. That is what sees the vision.
Initially, the disciple Andrew exclaims that this teaching that she has communicated to them is very strange. How could Jesus have taught such an unusual thing? But then Peter comes along and he challenges Mary, not based on the information that she has conveyed, but based on her gender. He says something to the effect that how is it that Jesus would have communicated this information to